Hello and welcome back to the next video in the sequence about making these quilted baubles. In the video about cutting up the fabric, I cut up the, it was this kind of fabric here, this pale rusty colour, and you saw me cutting it up in squares because I said somebody wanted another one of these exactly the same. And it wasn't until I was editing the video that I remembered that this bauble isn't actually made with the squares of fabric. It's a completely different pattern, and it's one that I got, which I downloaded from Ornament Girl, which is a great resource for learning how to do these. So I will use the pieces I cut yesterday, just not for a bauble like this. So let's have a look at how we start with the whole process of making our bauble. I've got a selection of fabrics here. Sometimes I know which fabrics I'm going to use because I just want one in that particular theme, and sometimes I don't know and I just get a load of fabrics out. Maybe like these are all kind of pinks and reds, and I will play around with what I want. Sometimes I decide what kind of pattern I want before I choose the fabrics, and sometimes I wait until I've got the fabrics and then choose the pattern. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'll show you what I mean with this one and this one. So initially these look the same, both got a star shape in the middle. However, the points that go around the edges are slightly different, if you can see that there. This is the first layer, the second layer, the third layer of fabrics. And on this one, I decided to put the third layer at these points here where the second layer squares met. On this one, it was much more straightforward. So I'm going to show you today the beginnings of this one, and we'll see how far we get. So to start off, you have your bauble, and hopefully you can see that there are the little indentations there, and on the opposite side there. I do use these to help me find the middle point of the end of the bauble, and I'm going to use this side today. I'll do a little dot. You do need to be careful with your choice of pen. Excuse me writing on the hand. With your choice of pen, that it's not going to rub off onto your fabric. But for today, I'm just going to show you how to mark the lines. So I always start with a square going across here, and I get the measuring tape to go all the way around, and I use that as a marking point for the centre line. So I'll line that up there, line that up there, and then I just use my pen to mark the bauble. I must admit, even doing this, sometimes I go a bit astray. Perhaps my folding hasn't been accurate, perhaps my measuring hasn't been accurate, and just line this up again on this side. To be honest, you've probably gathered by now, I don't let it distress me too much, unless the actual final one looks really pants, in which case I will unpick, let me concentrate. I will unpin them and go again. Now you can see that I didn't actually do a very good job there because I've ended up going skew-if, and that's one of the challenges with this. So you do need to be careful with this bit, is what I'm trying to say. The other thing that's important to know is that sometimes, because these are pre-manufactured, that bit there where the bumps are and that bit there are not necessarily totally in line with each other. And sometimes I will, instead of using this tape measure, I will use my metal ruler so that I get a bit more of a definite line. So it's up to you how you actually do this bit. I can see there that that's where it kind of veered off to the side, and I think that was where I was fiddling around with the tape. If that does happen, quite easy. Just go back to your beginning bit again, reline it up with the 2 points, and then redraw your line. I've never wanted to, but you can actually put a pin in your measuring tape here and here to keep it in place, but I've never done that. Then once you've got that line in place, you go the other way. And I use these, I use the 5 one. I use these longer lines on the tape measure to line it up there to get a right angle. Like this. And we're going like this. And then you mark the ball again. I call the best Blue Peter presenters. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is actually a demonstration one I use in classes, and you'll see that I've got some different markings on it, because I also show people how to find this kind of angle if we're doing a different kind of bauble. So for today, I am going to use this bit as our starting point, and we'll build up from there. So we've got our ball prepared. The next thing is to choose the fabrics that you want to use. And like I said earlier, very often I've got an idea of a colour theme, or I know whether I want spots or stripes, and I just play around with them. So looking at this colour palette that I have here, then I would say that one, beautiful fabric again, look, it feels so soft. However, for this colour palette, I'm going to say no, so I'm going to put that to one side. The pinks and the blues, they match up nicely, so I might be quite tempted to have those. I wouldn't necessarily want to have those right next to each other on the bauble, so I'd want to have an accent colour of some kind in between them, and I would usually go for a plain fabric in between. So something like that might work quite well. And then I wouldn't necessarily want to have another plain one, although I can. You can have the same fabric popping up again, so it could look like that. Let's have a think. This one, the nice candy stripe from the other day, I'm going to say no to that because I don't quite like it with this fabric here. As it happens, these 3 came in a fat quarter pack where somebody much more experienced than me put the colours together and the patterns together to match. So I'm going to say no to that one for today. The same with this one. I don't like it with that, and I don't like it with that, so I'm going to say no to that. And no to that one. The violin fabric, this is one of those lovely ones that comes under that category of when you fold it up, you're going to get different colours showing, but you're not going to know that they're violins. So for today, I'm going to say no to that one as well. Although, would I be more tempted to have that? And maybe that, no. And maybe that, no. I'm going to stick with this. So these are the 3 fabrics that I'm going to start with today. You can, of course, keep adding layers. And if I go back to this one, you can see that I actually did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of fabric, and some of them are very thin. I still use the same size square to get these thin ones, and there's no difference in that. So the number of layers that you have here, totally up to you. And if I show you this one I kept very simple, 1, 2, 3 layers, and that was it. Again, this was a lovely fat quarter, and that was the one with the bees. And I think that was actually dotty material, that pink in the middle. Doesn't show though. You can see little bits of the dots. So yeah, it's up to you how many layers. So the next bit, once we've decided on our 3 fabrics, is which order we're going to have them in. Do we want to have this at the middle, or this, or this? Do we want to have these 2 next to each other? Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And sometimes the only way to do it is to have a little play. I don't fuss too much about these little frayed bits. This one here, this material here, is actually a shirting type material. So it's quite thin as well. So you wouldn't necessarily want to be layering this one up on a dark fabric or a dark patterned fabric like this, because it might show through. So, as you've noticed, these bowls have got a mind of their own. So I have a secret extra little bit of equipment that I use. So to stop the bauble moving around too much, you can use something like a reel of sellotape, or this is actually masking tape, just to sit it inside so it's not going to go everywhere. I have also used this one in the past, just because it makes it a little bit higher up. The one thing I will say is you do need to watch out from pushing too hard on it. So if you push too hard down, you will end up with marks on your bowl. However, other people won't see it, not by the time you've got the fabric on it. So I think we're working with that one there, aren't we? So we're going to start today with some of the check fabric, I think. Or do I want the flowers? I'm going to start with the flowers. So when I'm doing this, I would usually fold up some bits of material first. I showed this in a previous video. And for this bit here, we need 4 of these folded things. So I will usually fold them up in advance. I find that it's a bit more time efficient that way, because you're not picking them up, picking pins, picking another one up. So I tend to just get the folds. As you can see, they're springing open. They've got a mind of their own. Don't bother me. Number 3. And number 4. Now, some fabrics will stay folded because they hold the finger press a lot easier. I don't ever go to the trouble of ironing and things like that because it's not necessary for this craft. So, I've got my pieces, I've got my pins, and I've got my bauble. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can put the pins into your triangle shape. You can put it just below the fold there where the point is going to be, and then you are going to put it into the middle there like that, and then you are going to fold along the lines like that. Now, ideally you want to overlap slightly this bit here. One of the reasons being that it saves you pins. Oh, pins have got a mind of their own as well. And you saw that I had to shake that a little bit to put it in. So once you've got one in on one corner, turn it round. And I'm going to do the opposite one. Now you can probably see, you can just about see that pin head. Again, I don't get too hung up on that because you can hide those pin heads when you put one of these pearlized pins in the middle. The other way that you can pin the first bit down is by putting it into the middle like that, where the thing's crossed over, and then you just pop it in there, fold it, and fold it again. And ideally you want these lines to be continuous. And sometimes this happens, and that's fine. I'm not going to pin it all the way down just yet because I want to place these two and see whereabouts we are with regards to how accurate my lines are. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. I will just put a little bit of a pin there. Maybe not. So putting the next one in, and you want to get them as close as you can. When you're putting this third one in, you want to line it up with those two straight lines, because then when you fold down, you've got your right angles. And you'll notice on this I'm not pushing all the way down at the moment. Turn it round. Get your next pin. And pop it in the middle. Again, line it up. And you can see this is the one where I didn't put it on the top, I put it in the middle, and it's slightly out of line. So we'll deal with that in a minute. And then you fold down. Like that. And if I fold this one, perhaps you can see that there is a slight, sorry, you're wobbling. There is a slight gap there, and there is a slight gap there. And that's where you can amend how much of this fold you've done. So I'm just going to take that pin out again, move it ever so slightly, and it might mean I need to put 2 pins in, and that's fine. And you can see sometimes it doesn't go in straight away, so I wobble it, which is probably making you all feel sick with the camera moving as well. And then this one here, just fiddle it a little bit just to get it looking right, and then pin that one. So then I'll pick it up and have a good look. Am I happy with that? Yes, I am. So I'm going to push those pins all the way in. And you'll notice at the moment I haven't put any pins here in those bits. And the reason for that is I like to get this bit here accurate first. And if you were really to get your micro measuring things out, this wouldn't be 100% accurate, but it's accurate enough. So with these bits here, this is where you can save a few pins, because you can see that this will go underneath there, and then I can get away with just putting one pin in. And you see I did have to wobble a lot there to get it in. Fold that one that way and fold that one going there. And one pin in there to hold the corner. Some pins go in really, really easily, and some, like you've just seen, I really need to wobble. Now, I'm not going to worry that this bit here is not following my line, because I can still see my line, and this bit here is following the line. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the last one, so there we have the first layer on the first side with 1, 2, 3, 4 squares of fabric. And how many pins did I use? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pins. For the next layer, put that down there for a second, we need to decide which fabric we're using. Now, we'll have just a little play with this and see what it's going to look like. Do I want that? No. And even at this point, I might actually change my mind about which fabrics I'm using and go for a different one. If I had a plain blue or some white fabric, I might go for either one of those as well, because I do like to alternate with the solid colour. Now, this fabric here, I don't know if you can see it, it's shiny. This is more of a satiny type fabric, but it doesn't have stretch in it as long as you cut it the correct way. If you pull it on the diagonal, it does have stretch, and that's where it might end up going out of shape a little bit. So this does fold well, and you can see that I've used it on this one here. So you don't necessarily need to stick to just cotton fabrics. You can use others as long as the weave of the fabric isn't too much. And you can see this one frays a lot. So with the next layer, we're going to have, I'm going to start here where my thumb is. We need 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need 8 pieces of fabric. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now it's also worth at this point remembering that whatever you're doing on this side, you are probably going to do the same on the other side. So I had 4 of those. So I'm just going to count out 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. put them to one side. And then I'll need, these are the 8 pinks I'm going to use now, and then I'll need 8 pinks for that other side. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And usually at the point where I'm deciding what fabrics to use, I will do the counting out for the number of pieces of fabric that I'm going to use. And it's worth remembering that the first layer of fabric needs 4 pieces. The next layer of fabric needs 8 pieces, assuming that you're going to put a piece of fabric at every fold line. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you might have just 4 pieces. It depends very much on what pattern you're using, but this is the very basic pattern. So, knowing my fabrics pretty well, this fabric does hold the creases. It's not going to hold the diagonal folds, but it will hold those. So I will fold these in half and then half again. And line them up here. So on this next layer, you need to decide how much you are going to come down from the center point for each of your points of the next layer. And I'm not always consistent on that. So on this one, I came down much further than I did on this one. So this center star is much bigger than this one. On this one, I think I'm right in saying I came down the same amount each time. On this one, I didn't. So on this bit here, I came down 2 centimeters, and on that one, it was more like 2.5. And that gives you a slightly different shape in the middle there to that other one that you saw just now. Now I have a secret cheat for this as well, because you could use your ruler or your measuring tape each time. However, this is my cheat. We're going to come down 5/8 of an inch, which will be to there. That was the pin breaking through the foam. So you can keep picking up your ruler, putting it down, picking it up, putting it down. Or, this is my cheats way. I get my spare piece of fabric and a pin, and I measure how far I'm going to do. I think I said 5/8. It's not 5/8, it's 3/8. So now instead of keep picking up, putting down, picking up, putting down my ruler, I can just use this as my little guide. So if you have a look closely, you can see that this is where there's the gap in the 2 fabrics. And this one here is in the middle of the fabric. with the second layer, I will usually start with where the gap is, just so that you don't always have all the gaps lined up going down your bauble. It just gives a nicer finish, I find. So I'm going to leave that pin there just now, and I'm going to come around to this side. And because it's the first one, there's the gap, there's the gap. I am just going to measure my 3/8. There it is there. And I shouldn't have used that. I should have used this. And then just double check. Gone a bit too high up. Once you've done this for a while, you will intuitively know these distances, so you won't have to fuss too much about the measuring. And then we just fold down again in the same way that we did on the first layer. And on this one, you do need to make sure that this section looks the same size as this section. You probably noticed then that this fabric is a little bit springy, which is one of the reasons why I don't like it. It can also sometimes be a bit fiddly to get the pins through. So having done one there, I'll go clockwise, not for any particular reason, just because I will. So we get our pin in again. Now we'll use our little secret measuring tape. Line that up with the centre, and then you can line your pin up with there, push it in and fold it up. There are times doing this when you wish you had more than two hands, I tell you. So I'm just going to do the other two on this layer, and then I'll come back. So there we have. I've got the first four done on the second layer. So again, you'll notice I haven't pinned these down yet. We're now going to put in the four in the middle of those ones, and we do it exactly the same way. So line it up, put your pin in and fold it down. And on this, on these ones, this is where if you want to make this gap bigger, you can change your measurement. It doesn't have to stay the same. And I like to just check that these two pieces here look as close as I can get to being the same as each other. Oh, now there's a bent pin. In a box of 2,000, you're going to find some wonky pins. The first time I ever made one of these, because I didn't know what I was doing, it took me about an hour and a half, because I was so unsure what I was doing, and I was trying to get it exactly exact. And like I said in an earlier video, my fingers really hurt from pushing the pins in. But now I can do them in probably about 40 minutes, maybe a bit quicker, depending on how many layers I'm doing and how many sips of my tea I have. Sometimes the tea sipping can get in the way. You can probably see there now where I've got quite a few score lines on the bauble, but they're minor and nobody's going to see it by the time it's all layered up with fabric. So there we have that layer. Now the reason I haven't pinned all of these down as we've gone along, twofold. One is to show you kind of different way of folding it when you're putting them under. And the other is because I like to see how much of an overlap I've got, and I like to save pins. And I also like to just double check my measurements, because for some reason this one here seems shorter than this one. This one here is a little bit too far away. So I'm just going to take it out, move it up ever such a slight little bit, and explain to you why that sometimes happens better. So sometimes when you put the pins into the bauble, because this is only foam, polystyrene foam, they might slip a little bit and make a bigger hole. So it's always worth just checking. I'm happier with that. So on the traditional one that I first learnt, you would pin down these middle ones there and then pin these down. When I got a little bit more confident at trying things for myself, I did different things. Like with this one. I don't know if you can see, but I pinned one and then layered it under, and layered it under, and layered it under. And if that was what you were going to do, then before putting them under, you would put that on top of there, that one on top of there, that one on top of there, and that one on top of there. So that you have that kind of look. For today, we are going to do the traditional way. So just take all those and just undo all that I've just done. That's on there, that comes out there, and that one comes out there. So now we need to pin these down. And again, this is where I like to save pins. So I'll pin through. Now you do need to make sure you try and get as close to the edges as you can, because sometimes when you do another layer, then the pins will show in these gaps. I find that you don't necessarily need to pin these ones here down. That's the ones that are underneath. It's just being very tight with my pins, basically. Probably gives you a more secure bauble if you do pin them down. But you end up with so many pins in these things that and it doesn't always matter. And you can probably see all of the little hairy bits of frayed fabric that are falling off. That's one of the things with using a satiny type fabric, that it does fray. So I do try and clear those off as I go along, being very careful not to fray it too much, otherwise the pins will come out. So there we have the second layer. Okay, so now we're going to move on to putting the third layer of fabric on, and I've got a bit of a head start. I've already folded them and put the pins in place, so it makes it a bit quicker this time. Now you can do the same distance down if you want to, or you can change it so that you've got more of the pink showing. And I think what we'll do with this one, just for the sake of time, is we will make it 1/2 inch this time. So we're not changing it by very much, but we are changing it a bit. And you can mark this with a pen if you want to as well. It doesn't need to be a pin. So, this one. So, having done the second layer, we usually start in these middle ones and do the third layer. So that's what I'm going to do. And it's exactly the same as we've just done. You measure down, I'll put your pin in, and we are looking for this line here to be as straight as we can get it. And you can probably see on this now, I have actually succeeded in matching those. It was unintentional. Please ignore any extra purple lines you're seeing on my bauble, because remember what I said at the start of this video, they are for a training. And I've just realised I'm going to have to do myself another training bauble now. Oh well, never mind. So, next one, get our pin, line it up with there, and put the pin in. If you want to, you can measure from the centre down so that you're always getting from the centre. I tend to just do it from the points. And again, I try and get this bit and this bit matching up. Not very successful on this one, I don't think. There we have the first 4 on layer 3 done. So now we go on to the next one, the middle ones. Now, if you're doing one of these for the first time, please do not worry that this bit looks different to this bit. It will do, because it's on a different part of the bauble. So these are underneath and these were the ones that were on top, so you're going to get a bigger shape. And try and make sure you line it up with the lines underneath if you've still got those visible. last one. The struggle is real. So we've now got all 8 of the third layer done, and then we just go around pinning down again. And again, keep these pins over towards the corners. I forgot to check, but none of the pins are showing there, which is good. There we go. So there we have 3 layers. You can go through and just poke the pins in a bit more, but if you imagine when they're hung up, nobody's really going to see those, and like I said earlier, you can hide those with the pearlised pins or sequins or whatever you want to use. So normally I'd have a middle line as well, so I would know how far down I've come down the bauble. From experience, I know that I need another layer here before I consider putting anything on the other side, and you can probably tell that for yourself. So it's rinse and repeat. Do the same thing again and decide what colour you want next. So I am going to finish this video here for just now, and thank you very much for your time, and I will come back again in another video to show you how we complete it by doing the other side. Thanks for watching again.